issues, but one of the most important ones every year includes voting and making sure that we educate everyone on the different issues and making sure you are an informed voter before you go out to the polls. And that's exactly what we've come together to do this evening. And I'm so thankful that all of you have decided to come out and join us even in the rain. Thank you so very much. And those that are on their way, we really do appreciate it.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Victoria Clark, and I am president of the Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network. And on behalf of YPN, I would like to thank you and welcome you all here tonight. This is the 14th year of this event, so thank you for keeping it going, for showing up every year. So people ask what the Urban League is, what YPN does, and the short answer is that we empower communities and we change lives. We focus on 5 areas: health, housing, education, jobs, and justice. And fortunately for all of us, that is exactly what we're going to be talking about with our candidates tonight. So we urge you to think of some questions as the candidates speak and get the most out of this program. And make sure that in November, you go and cast an educated vote. Thank you.
And at this time, we are going to ask the chaplain of the Social Justice Ministry, Heather Taylor, to come forward to lead us in an opening prayer. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So just by way of centering us, I would like to read a short excerpt, if you will indulge me, from a Pan-African Christian devotional that was published this year to commemorate the martyrdom of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And it begins for this month. In times like these, we lift our voices during the midterm elections. The right to vote for African Americans came at a costly price. It came as a result of 3 long and treacherous phases in American history. Before 1865, the first phase, African Americans were considered full citizens and not eligible to vote. In 1865, the second phase, Black men were given the right to vote, in theory. But they were still denied the opportunity when they went to the voting booths. It wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that all African Americans were granted access to the polls after Bloody Sunday. But today, some people in our Black and brown communities do not have the opportunity to vote, such as formerly incarcerated individuals in other parts of our nation and legal residents who happen to be immigrants. It is crucial that Black and brown communities exercise their right to vote during this midterm election. The near sacred privilege of voting is due to every U.S. citizen. It is necessary to elect government leaders and enact legislation that eradicates poverty, hunger, and injustice. If you would bow your heads. Our loving and liberating Lord Jesus Christ, you are a God of justice who calls us to right relationships with you, ourselves and others. You lift the least, the lowly, the lonely, the left behind and left out, including those who are affected by poverty and hunger. You have taught us to do likewise. Father, we just ask that you would bless this forum tonight, that you would move upon each candidate to speak their truth, and that you would open our ears that we might hear and discern what it is that they say, so that we can be positioned in November to make the right decision at the polls. And regardless of how the elections turn out, that we would fulfill our civic duty thereafter, that we would bless our neighbor, that we would hold our officials accountable. We are blessed in this Alexandria community and at Alfred Street Baptist Church, but we must remember those who struggle even in the midst of us. Lord God, we pray that you will be with us this evening, that we might have a productive, civil, engaging, fruitful dialogue led and permeated by your Spirit. These things we do pray and ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Great. Let the church say amen. Good evening to all of you all. I also bring you greetings on behalf of the Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network. I am Tavares Floyd, your Director of Political Engagement for YPN. This evening, I have a very special task to recognize some very important people who have come this evening to make this event happen. And without them, it would not be what it is tonight. And certainly, I would also like to thank all of you for traveling in the weather, all of the rain to make it here. And so certainly we appreciate that. So we have two community partners for this year, the National Society of Black Engineers, Northern Virginia. Our second community partner is Agudas Akim Congregation. Our strategic partners for this year's political forum, National Coalition of 100 Black Women, Northern Virginia Chapter. Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Northern Virginia Alumni Chapter. Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP Chapter of Alexandria. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Zeta Chi Omega Chapter. The Links Incorporated, Arlington Chapter. Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Nu Xi Zeta Chapter. I would also like to recognize some VIP people that are in the congregation tonight. We had with us Lieutenant Governor of Commonwealth of Virginia, Mr. Justin Fairfax, Laverne Chapman, Mr. Stephen Porter, Robert Jenkins Jr., Britton Smith, my friend, Reverend Marcia Dyson, thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Renee Allen, thank you also for being with us. Kofi Annan, President, Fairfax County NAACP. Danielle Armstrong, Vice President, Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professional Network. Deja Holland, Director of Social Programs, Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network. Salim Adolfo, Director of Personal and Professional Development, Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network. Dr. Lakeisha Terrell, Chair of Policy and Procedures, Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network. Crystal Esiao, Director of Membership, Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network. Regina Warren, Secretary, Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network. Ladies and gentlemen, I do think this concludes our list of VIPs. Again, on behalf of the Alfred Street Social Justice Ministry, Reverend Dr. Howard John Wesley, and the Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network, we thank you for being here.
So this is free flowing. We're gonna, it seems like after the rain, everyone's a little down, but we're going to, this is an opportunity for us to mix and mingle together and definitely learn about the issues. At this time, we're asking Reverend Allen to come forward to introduce our moderator for this evening.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. How you feel? You look good, too. I want to first thank Victoria and Tavares for coming to my show last Wednesday to advocate, talk about, and just push the importance of your vote. So if I get everyone to participate, I want you to say, your voice, your vote. Yes, yes, yes. All right. So I am so thankful to be able to introduce this woman of God, just a fighter for women, a global philanthropist. She's just an amazing person, Dr. Marcia Dyson. And before I do, I just want to let you all know that She pours her heart into everything she does. I happen to be a mentee, friend, sister of hers, and from the moment I met her, her light just shined on me. You know how you meet someone that just shines on you? And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So she wanted me to cut this short, but she deserves this short bio presentation. I'm going to do that, ma'am, okay? All right. Marcia L. Dyson, an ordained minister, is one of America's most respected civil social activists and communications specialists. She is the president and CEO of M&M Dyson LLC and Dyson Global Associates, an international consultant, enterprises in matters of business, development, marketing, political strategies, and social engagement. And she is the founder and CEO of Women's Global Initiative for-profit entity to enhance the lives of women via wealth, education for profitable and purposeful engagement. She has served as the first, everyone say first, Chief of Staff for Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr.'s Operation Push International Trade Bureau, where she created and executed multi-country conferences and conventions and discussions of trade policy, foreign policy, economic development, and education. She served as a public information officer for the mayor's office of Chicago, where she built bridges across the diverse 87 ethnic communities through cultural diplomacy and world-class events. Reverend Dyson was a top advisor to Women's Entrepreneurial Day hosted at United Nations to promote women in business in 144 countries. She is a committee member of Knock Out Abuse that raises millions for women and families of domestic abuse. Reverend Dyson is the first, everyone say first, chaplain for the Coalition of Hope. The Coalition of Hope Foundation, which is comprised of active and retired global and forces military personnel. Reverend Dyson's latest honors are being appointed as CEO and trustee of the newly formed House of Mandela Family Foundation. Reverend Dyson is on first-name basis with dignitaries in government, entertainers, athletes, global religious leaders, and media personnel. Just check her Facebook out. She was a contributor to Essence Magazine, The Griot, The Root, and Huffington Post online media. Reverend Dyson has utilized her knowledge to promote the commonalities and benevolence of all faiths. Her spiritual wisdom and insight has been shared in historical lectures across America, on lecture stages around the world, and at many of the nation's outstanding universities. Her writing can be found on the pages of some of our country's most provocative magazines and books. All of her work affords Reverend Dyson the opportunity to address interlocking and converging interests and issues that define her vocation: gender, inequality and oppression, economic just governance, political inequity, moral marketing and branding, and local, national, and international affairs. Reverend Marcia Dyson is working on several scripts for movies and documentaries. She is also working on 2 books, The World at My Door, Practicing Cultural Political Diplomacy, and Irreverent Memoir of a Grown-Ass Woman. St. Martin Press, Fall 2019. And that is just her short bio, y'all. Ladies and gentlemen, politicians, distinguished guests, members of this fine historic church, the Northern Virginia Urban League Young Professionals Network, and Reverend Dr. Howard John Wesley, it gives me great honor, pleasure, amazing privilege to introduce Reverend Marcia Dyson!
After reading all that, it really makes me want to go home and take a nap. But when people ask me, how did I do all those things, I celebrate my 67th birthday at the end of this month. So I've lived and known some rivers. And I come from the city of Chicago and have always been active, seemingly in politics, even though it was not a familiar activity within my home. But one thing that I do know, that you weathered the storm to come out here tonight to hear some hopeful candidates so that our days, regardless of the weather, might be sunny because you have elected, through it being an informed citizen, the person to put in office. It's not about being reactive. It's not about personality. It's about an informed choice. In 1893, an orator, Francis Ellen Watkins Hopper, said, "It is criminal to put the ballot in the hands of an ignorant Negro." Now that might have seemed sort of antithetical to our thrust, but she knew not ignorant because we couldn't read, ignorant because we have not been taught what the value of the vote was or how to vote for, and particularly at that particular time and juncture in the life for African Americans. So here we are now, and we have a group of people who want to represent you. And let me say this as a person who lives in the district, that I remind people, and this is no offense to anyone, but the elected officials are your servant. North Capitol is not a moat. The Capitol itself and the Senate and the congressional buildings are not castles. We have no kings or queens, prince or princesses up there. I have no uncles. I have no aunts. I have no relatives on the Hill. I have a person there to represent in the federal government, as you do locally, that was paid by my vote to make sure the Capitol, called the bodies called us, are well and healthy as they are in the post that we put them. Now that that's been said, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we do it, okay? These people that I'm going to announce are going to come up for 2.5 to most 3 minutes and tell you about themselves. I hate to call it, I just came from South Carolina, but yeah, I'm going to put them on the stock market right here. Though it's fallen, let's see if they rise in your estimation about their value and what they're going to give you. First, we're going to hear, of course, from the U.S. Senate, Corey Stewart, followed by my good friend Regina Thomas, then Vanjie Williams, Thomas O., Don Breyer, Jeff A. Dove, Steven Porter, and Willie Bailey. So first, can we please have what you have to tell the audience tonight? Senator Corey Stewart? No? Is he here? He's not here? Okay, no representation? He's coming? Okay, all right. Next up, my girl, Regina Thomas. I'm not being biased here, but Regina representing Kane's interest. Thank you. You're welcome.
I want to thank everyone for coming out and Michael just being mad at us and decided that he just couldn't be in Florida and Georgia, but he wanted to shed some tears here. So for those of you who come out, I am Regina Thomas, the Reverend Dr. Regina Thomas, former Secretary of the great state of New Jersey. And I'm going to do something a little different. You know how preachers got to do. I was invited here because I know Senator Kane, and I met Senator Kane when he was the chair of the Democratic National Committee, and didn't know much about him, but had an opportunity to take him to the National Baptist Conference in Kansas City. When I got to Kansas City, I didn't realize that Senator Kane was from Kansas City. And I was a little nervous because here he was about to meet a lot of Baptist preachers. But when I tell you that Senator Kane was so comfortable, he was so genuine in that attitude. He began to then talk about, I just didn't come here as a chair of the DNC. And he began to tell the story about when he was an attorney fighting for civil rights, for the dignity of all people. And I've known him throughout the years to just be that genuine person. I don't travel with candidates just for the sake of traveling. I got to have a real love and respect for who they are. And so I bring to you a candidate. I will give you his bio. His campaign managers is back here. His staff is back here. They are present. But I am here to tell you that this man is very genuine. It did not start when he became a senator. But when he started out in life, and Lieutenant Governor Fairfax told you, he went on missions. He decided that he had nothing else to do. He was going to leave the comfort of the United States and head out to a foreign country for the least lost and the left out. And then when he came back, he decided, I'm going to just be an attorney. And he didn't go into corporate law to make all of the money, but he found that there were some indignities in the state of Virginia, and he decided to represent those folk. And with that great passion, I come to you and urge you, if I come all the way from Trenton, New Jersey, where we have a Senate race, to tell you, please, please, as you listen to all the information today and visit the website, I urge you to support my friend, Senator Kane. Amen.
All right, I have to watch this up. Mr. Stewart, can you join us? And after you finish your presentation, you can have a seat here up at the podium. Excellent. Watch this step, okay?
Great. Well, good evening. Really great to be here with you all tonight. I'm looking forward to a good discussion. I got to say, I had some of my staff say, Corey, you know, you're never going to get any votes, at this event. But I think that's the problem with Washington, is that we're not talking to each other. I think that there's too much yelling. I think that Republicans are blaming their issues on Democrats, and Democrats are blaming problems on the Republicans. But, what I've had to do over the past 12 years as the at-large chairman of the Board of Supervisors of Prince William County is to get things done. My county is 55% minority. It is predominantly Democratic, but I've been able to win there as a Republican 4 times countywide because we've been able to work together. And we all know that we're going to have the differences. We're always going to have differences. But if we can focus on the things that we have in common in improving our schools and building roads and making our neighborhoods more safe, that's what I've been able to do. And to keep tax bills as low as possible. And that's what I've done in Prince William County, and making the county #1 in job growth, and in Virginia #3 in the United States. We've got the largest road building program in the entire state, even though we're about half the size of Fairfax County. And we've improved our schools. We're building about 1 to 2 schools every year. We have 95,000 kids in our school system. We've hired thousands of new teachers and hundreds of new firefighters and police officers. And 10 years ago, when there was a problem with several crimes that were being committed by illegal immigrants, I worked and did something about it. And I worked together with the community. And ultimately, the policy that we put in place was passed unanimously by Democrats and Republicans. And it's very simple. And that is that if someone's arrested in Prince William County, we check their immigration status. We check their immigration status regardless of their race, regardless of the language that they speak. And we have, that way we have focused in on the criminal element within the illegal immigrant community. And I have to say, and I'm very proud of this, we haven't had a single incident of racial profiling, not one. And that policy has been in place for 10 years, and so far we've handed over to the federal government more than 10,000 illegal immigrants who have committed crimes in Prince William County. I'm very, very proud of that. A couple years ago, we worked on a policy. I'm very, I'll wrap it up. Okay. Something that's very dear to me is criminal justice reform. And some of you might be surprised by that as a conservative Republican, but I've got a reason for that. And that is when my father was 19 years old, he did a very stupid thing, and he was convicted of a felony. In fact, it was involuntary manslaughter. And he never got his voting rights back. I didn't know this until I was 19 or 20 years old. He never got his voting rights back. I didn't know it bothered him his entire life. He was a longshoreman. I know he wanted to do other things. He wanted to go to school. He wanted to get a different kind of job. He could never do that. And so I think it's one thing that I would like to do, and I would like to do this on the federal level, is this. And that is I would support, and in fact I would author the legislation, ban the box legislation. And because when we were young, we do foolish things. And when we grow up a little bit, we can change our lives around. I just think it's wrong that one of the first questions that you're asked, if you're trying to get a federal job If you're trying to get a job with government, one of the first questions that you're asked is, have you been convicted of a serious misdemeanor or a felony? And if you check that box, your application goes right into the hopper, and you never get a second chance. So what this legislation would do would say, at least in the first round of the employment application process, we ban that box. And that gives a chance to the applicant to say, look, you're going to find out that when I was young and foolish, I did something wrong, but I've turned my life around. And you can explain it. And I think that's one thing we're going to do, and I will finish up with this. And finally, it is my feeling that you shouldn't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on attorney's fees to clear your record after you've been acquitted of a crime. If you've been acquitted, your record should be automatically expunged. That's my feeling, and I will push for that legislation. So I look forward to our conversation tonight. Thank you all for having me and the invitation.
Vanjie Williams.
Good evening. You're going to have to do better than that. Y'all sitting in the church. Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for coming out in this beautiful weather. God blessed us with it. We got to take it. And thank you to all of the groups who have put this together. It's an honor to come all the way from King George, Virginia, all the way up here. Yes, it's a long drive. Well, who am I? My name is Vanjie Williams. I'm running for Congress in the 1st District of Virginia against Rob Whitman. And I'm going to change that. I'm running for us, we the people. I'm running because I understand the struggles of life. I understand what we need to do to improve our lives, because I know that we, as American citizens, we deserve better. My platform is simple. It's an economy that works for everyone: healthcare, housing, education, childcare, retirement. Because we all know once you retire, you should not have to work at McDonald's or Walmart. You should be able to live. Healthcare is my second priority, making sure that we have Medicare for all, or as my team has started calling it, Medicare Now, with dental and vision. Because we all understand that when your dental health goes down, your overall health goes down. And for my veterans, rolling VA care, TRICARE, and Medicare on together so that you can go to a VA hospital when you need specialized care, but you should be able to go to any medical facility when you need general care. That's what we deserve in this country, making sure that we are all represented. My last platform, not last, is not the last because I have many, is investing in our communities and our hometown heroes. I want to make sure that our educators, our first responders, our veterans, and our enlisted military have that hand up by introducing my Invest initiative, which will exempt the first $50,000 of income from federal taxes for these groups of people. Basically $5,000 a year back in their pocket, and it won't cost us one penny. By closing 2 or 3 of the tax loopholes that corporations are taking advantage of right now, we can put the money right back in our community. And by the way, folks, let me tell you some history about us, because got to wrap it up. I see the 1-minute mark. This campaign is a historical campaign, as is all the women in the district this year. But this campaign, this honors a community that has never had a representative on Capitol Hill, and that's the African American community and the Asian community. I will be the first woman of color to represent Virginia on Capitol Hill with your support. So I ask everybody to please visit our website, vanjieforcongress.com, because this campaign has not taken $1 from corporate PACs, but we need your help to keep it people funded so I can be beholden to people and not those who want us to vote in their favor. I thank you for having me out, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thomas O.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hosting this event. I know it's a thankless job. My name is Thomas O. I'm the Republican nominee running in the 8th Congressional District. I'm a recently transitioned Army veteran. I was born and raised here in Northern Virginia, actually. Went to school in Centerville. I live over right over in West End, Alexandria. And I left active duty military last year, and I just recently decided to run for Congress back in March. And people say, why made you decide to run for Congress, actually? And it came down to what I learned in the military. I learned in the military, and as an officer, I started as enlisted, but I became an officer, that as an officer, you work for your subordinates, and your subordinates don't work for you. And I learned to be a servant to all my soldiers, and that's what I plan to do as your next representative, is to serve you. And I actually give great kudos to Ms. Williams, because she doesn't take any corporate PAC money, and I'm the only candidate that does not take any corporate PAC money as well in the 8th district, so thank you for doing that. It sets the right step and a positive example. And the reason why I'm sure Ms. Williams would agree is because I want to make sure that our representatives and our government represents individual citizens and are not tainted by corporate PAC money. There's a lot of bills that come in and they start with good intentions, but after politicians are bought, it comes out very negatively. And I also learned, in the military, that the Constitution comes first before all else. This doesn't put the corporations, your political party, or even the president above the Constitution. And I also learned that you need to think objectively and look at the facts. Everyone thinks they got the right answer, especially right now how we're so polarized, Republicans and Democrats. But there's only one answer, and that's the compromise, and the answer that works. That's why I say I'm a moderate Republican, because everything is better in moderation, of course. I'm glad y'all understood that. But I'm talking about multivitamins, okay? Multivitamins. You can't have too many vitamins. So as we discuss forward, please visit my website. It's www.letschangecongress.org. You can follow me on Facebook or Twitter at O4Congress. Please take the time to look over my platforms, and you can actually ask questions along during this campaign. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Don Beyer, and I am delighted to be back in this historic and very relevant church. This is an amazing community with a world-famous musical program, and having listened to Dr. Wesley many times, the most impressive homilist I've ever heard in my whole life. I've been honored to serve as your congressman the last 4 years, and I do believe the most important quality you must demand in your political leaders is a servant's heart. And I hope I show that every day. This is the servant leader that I want to be. Look, I work on many issues every day: climate change, women's economic empowerment, suicide prevention, free trade, and more. But tonight I want to talk about the unhappy legitimization of racial intolerance and white supremacy, and all the blatant and subtle ways they're expressed in America today. From Donald Trump to Charlottesville to the many repressive laws across this country, we must be outspoken in rejecting hate. Let me detail just 5 ways in which I'm trying to make a difference. First, I'm the lead sponsor of the No Hate Act, which rewards and requires police departments across the country to record all hate crimes. We can't manage what we don't measure, and an enormous number of police departments don't record any hate crimes at all, or if they report them, they say they had none. Second, I am a strong supporter of criminal justice reform. We have the most prisoners in the world locked up, 2.3 million. We have the highest percentage in the world. We have 160,000 men over the age of 55 locked up. This makes no sense at all. So this is crazy. By the way, I also strongly support the restoration of rights, the automatic restoration of rights. And I strongly oppose the death penalty. Third, I'm going to do everything I can to fight the odious voter ID and purge laws. These are the 2018 versions of the literacy tests and the poll taxes that we used to keep people of color from voting in Virginia for all those years. And fourth, I'm going to keep fighting for common sense gun laws. 19 children are shot every day in America, and our gun violence is insane. And fifth, I'm going to try to keep doing all I can authentically to put men and women of color into positions of responsibility, good income, and career responsibility in my office, in our family business, and throughout America. And my business banned the box years and years ago. I was proud to be Barack Obama's Mid-Atlantic Finance Chairman, one of the very first volunteers in his campaign. I was honored to share the Democratic ticket with my dear friend Doug Wilder, the nation's first African-American governor. And there's a great deal to talk about tonight, but I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you.
Jeff Dove.
Make sure I don't fall. Hey, good evening, everyone. So I'm Jeff Dove. You guys probably haven't heard of me yet. I'm the Republican nominee for Congress in Virginia's 11th Congressional District. I actually announced my candidacy in February 2017, so I'm kind of a cagey veteran compared to the rest of these people. I've been doing this for a while now. So just a little bit about me. I was born in Silver Spring, Maryland. I've lived in the DC area pretty much my entire life, except in high school. For some reason, my mother liked moving between the DC area and Roanoke, Virginia. So I actually ended up going to 5 different high schools. And that being the new guy 5 times was really tough, just to say the least. It actually prepared me for doing a lot of this, actually. After high school, I joined the U.S. Army, where I served from 2004 to 2007 with the 4th Infantry Division out of Fort Carson, Colorado. I went on tour to Iraq once, where I was on 230-plus combat patrol missions and was awarded the Combat Action Badge for engaging the enemy in combat. Afterwards, I didn't really know what I was going to do with myself, and I decided, man, I like video games, I like computers, I should get into IT. So I actually started going to school at Strayer University while working full-time, and got my degree in information systems, database administration focus, and that's what I've been working in for the past 9 years. And I've worked for small corporations or small nonprofits all the way up to the federal government and large companies. So one of the things that I feel that elected officials, their primary responsibility is the physical and digital security of all Americans. So what I've really been focused on is the fact that I've had this experience, this interesting experience where I've been on the physical battlefield, I've seen those things, and I've also been on this digital battlefield. It's a new battlefield of the 21st century. And I've been coming out with proposals that have been basically changing the way we think about things. One of the biggest things on my platform that I've been talking about since day one is revamping the Social Security numbers and the security around those. I know you guys are probably familiar with multi-factor authentication. I know this is not a sexy issue, but multi-factor authentication is basically adding more security around the number. So every time somebody presents it, they have to provide some secondary form of authentication. It's crazy to me that there are video games that are more secure than our Social Security numbers are. That should not be the case. And so this is not a right or left issue. This is an issue for all of us. I know I've been a victim of identity theft, and I want to try and protect as many people as I can as well. If you guys want to learn more about me, we'll be talking. But you can check out my website at www.doveforcongress.com. And God bless you all. Thank you.
Mr. Porter.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Steve Porter. I'm a little different because I'm actually a libertarian candidate. Despite what you may hear, there are actually some candidates out there that are not Republicans and they're not Democrats. And the big thing that makes us different is our focus is not so much left versus right as it is the rights of the individual, rights and responsibilities of the individual, as opposed to collective state-type issues. So a big part of what I believe is that you understand what's best for you, the people you love, and your communities, and the closer we can keep government to that, the better it is. One thing I'd like to do right now is all of you take a look at these first couple rows right here. These are your local candidates. Honestly, these are the people you should be caring more about electing and how they're going to impact your life than anyone sitting at this table up here. They're people that you need to be informed about their races, so please. Just really quick about me. I'm an IT guy from the Seattle area originally. I actually enjoy being a volunteer paramedic and assistant chief. I've done that for about 16 years out in Loudoun County. I love serving people. And I got involved because, frankly, I got tired of all of this in politics. I really want to get some civility back in that discussion. Also, among my chief concerns in my campaign is criminal justice reform. Several issues rise to the top there. First of all, civil asset forfeiture. The idea that they can charge your property with a crime and take it away from you without ever convicting you of anything, that's just insane, and that just needs to end. Secondly, as already has been said, we have people who have committed crimes without victims. Why are they in jail? We have people being locked up for nonviolent crimes that are in there for extended periods of time, often longer than people who have been convicted of violent crimes. That's just wrong. And then we have a real problem with disparity in races in how our laws are being enforced, and that's just not right. You know, I should not have a better chance of getting off because this is the color of my skin as opposed to someone with darker skin. And one last thing I want to say about this whole restoring rights, voting rights, why are we taking them away in the first place? There is no reason for most crimes, maybe for like domestic terrorism or treason or something like that, but for most crimes, why are we disenfranchising people in the first place? So that's a little bit brief about me. You can look up more about me at www.porterforus.com, and I look forward to your questions.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Willie Bailey. I serve on the Alexandria City Council, but I'm also a firefighter in Fairfax County. So Congressman Conley asked would I come out and say a few words on his behalf, because back in the day I was big in my union and I beat him up a lot on pay and things of that issue, so he figured I owed him, so I told him I would speak on his behalf. And he did treat us right, I have to say that. Thank you so much for having me today. Congressman Conley wishes he could be here today, but he is committed to another event tonight. I've known Congressman Conley since he was on the Board of Supervisors in Fairfax County. I've always admired how he fought for employees and civil rights issues. I've served as a firefighter in Fairfax County for over 27 years, and Jerry Conley has always had our back. Now that I've served in local government myself, I realize just how important that experience is for Jerry in Congress. In local government, people hold you accountable for delivering results. And in Congress, Jerry has consistently delivered on his promises. And last month, he won a key victory. And thanks to Jerry, if there's another government shutdown, families who lost loved ones in war will still receive their military death gratuities. Jerry's fought against voter ID laws that overwhelmingly disenfranchise minority communities. He has co-sponsored legislation to strengthen federal laws against hate speech and crimes. And he's worked across party lines on legislation to strengthen minority hiring in the national security field. Thanks to Jerry, we have Metro to Tysons and soon all the way to Dulles Airport. He voted for the stimulus, which allowed us to finish both the Fairfax County and Prince William County parkways. If he's elected and the Democrats take back the House, legislation held up by a minority of Republicans can finally become law. He will work with Democrats and Republicans on immigration reform, common sense gun safety reform, and infrastructure bill, and bringing down health insurance premiums by ending the Republican sabotage of Obamacare. I promise I will let him know that you clapped for him. On the Oversight Committee, he will hold this president accountable for his conflicts of interest, corruption in the administration, and the I'll tell him about that one too, sir. And the disastrous response to Hurricane Maria that left 3,000 Americans dead. Thanks so much for having me here today. Again, Congressman Conley wishes he could be here in person, and he hopes that he can earn your vote in November. Also, if you have specific questions, i.e. on civil rights, health care, gun safety laws, things of that nature, you can go to his website, www.jerryconley.com. Again, thank you.
I want to thank the elected officials, Don Breyer and Willie Bailey, for joining us, and also John Chapman and Dale Pepper for being with us as well. But before I start my moderation, I want to acknowledge Don Kellaway, the National Voter Protection Action Fund representative, who may come up and give us a few words.
Good evening. I'm Don Calloway, one of the co-founders of the National Voter Protection Action Fund. First of all, I'd like to take a moment of silence and pray for Brother Kanye. I'm joking. Bad joke. Let's pray for that brother. Chill. No, sorry. I only got a few seconds. NVPActionFund.org, NVPActionFund.org. Voting happens in 3 stages. First of all, we register to vote. Everyone's registered, right? Second of all, very good. Second of all, we get out the vote. Everybody's going to get everybody we know out to vote, right? Here's the part we don't think about. Congressman Beyer mentioned it briefly. Election protection, anti-voter suppression work. That is the crucial part, and that's what we've got to be focused on now, in addition to making sure that everyone who registered got out to vote. 53,000 voters were purged from Georgia's voting rolls for this cycle in this particular election. 37,000 of those, 70%, are likely African American voters. We are working in 7 states to protect our brothers and sisters' access to the ballots in this current election cycle. So here's what we're asking you to do. Go to nvpactionfund.org and give $5 to the cause of protecting votes in 7 states this year that A, have a history of pernicious and intentional voter suppression, and B, have crucial elections this year with historic candidates and record expected turnout. nvpactionfund.org. We're asking everybody to give $5 to the cause. We will go into each of these 7 states and fund election protection plans, election protection field plans. We're funding organizations who have plans in place to protect the vote from now through Election Day and even going through necessary challenges. You can find all the information there on nvpactionfund.org. Thank you all so much for being concerned citizens. God bless you, Alfred Street. Vote, vote, vote. Thank you. God bless.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. I want to get straight to it. You, Callaway, you invoked Kanye West, who was supposed to be talking to the president about situations in Chicago, which I'm very familiar with. And one of the foremost in the forefront of my mind, especially as I see a row of women who have on red T-shirts, Moms Demanding Action, really is this proliferation of gun and gun violence in our nation. And I know that it's a big conversation here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, too. So I'm going to ask you, whoever wants to engage very shortly, what is your plan to reduce gun violence in the Commonwealth? And first of all, what do you think, in order to eradicate that, what do you think contributes to it that you have to address also before you say you're going to just handle it? How are you going to handle it? By looking at systemically what caused the problem in the first place. I'm going to start with you, Regina.
Senator Kane has historically, not only when he was the mayor, but when he was the governor and also in the Senate, was able to bring people together to have a discussion. He is clearly for gun change. He does not believe that all of these guns need to be on the streets, but by bringing people together to have a conversation, a real conversation, and after that conversation to begin to react on it, he believes that to reduce guns on the street. I'm going to say that again. Reduce guns on the street, to take them literally off the streets, irrespective of what kind of guns it is. As a governor, the greatest mass shooting happened in the state of Virginia. And so he also wants to, in addition to looking at reducing the guns off the street, want to begin to handle and take care of mental health and those issues a lot of times which produce some of this violence with guns. And so he believes in a comprehensive support, and not only just in name, but he has a history, in fact, of doing so and will continue to do so.
Okay. Williams?
Well, my platform has been simple from the very beginning. I have a saying that I said back in April of last year: if it takes you 30 bullets to shoot a deer, you need to go fishing. And it's the matter of the point that I have no problem with the Second Amendment, but I do want to focus on common sense gun reform, having conversations with people who want change. That means understanding that we need universal or federal background checks so we know who owns guns state to state, making sure that we shore up our reciprocity laws. You should not be able to go from Maryland into Virginia with a weapon and Virginia not know you have one. And last but not least, making sure domestic abusers do not have guns. A lot of people want to say it's this or that. We have to have that conversation, and it cannot be about party. It has to be about people, we the people. I've also said another thing. I'm not running to be the liberal congresswoman or the conservative congresswoman. I'm running to be the people's congresswoman. And if it takes people one-on-one to understand that as a person, not as a party, we have to have common sense conversations. That's what we're going to need up on Capitol Hill.
Okay, Mr. Stewart?
Thank you. This, of all issues, is the one where the politics needs to come out of it.
Yes.
It has to come out of it. Every single American, after every shooting in all these schools across this country, your hearts are ripped out. And it's the number one nightmare that we all have, that something like that could happen in our kids' schools. And we, in Prince William County, after the shooting at Sandy Hook, we recognized that Republicans and Democrats had differences of opinions on the issue of gun control. I don't think it works. I don't think it's ever worked. But we got together, we said, well, what can we do about it? How can we prevent it? And so what we did is we have 95 schools in Prince William. We hired school resource officers, armed school resource officers, in every one of our middle schools and high schools, and now we are placing retired police officers trained in all of our elementary schools as well. It's a great cost. Now, not every locality can afford to do that. Because here's the thing, why do we protect our money with guns, but we protect our kids with signs?
Okay.
The gun-free zones, they just don't work. They've never worked. A criminal is never going to turn around because they see a sign like that. We need to have SROs, school resources officers, in our schools, and for the localities who cannot afford to do so, we need to have a federal aid to make sure that all of our kids in every community across this country are protected.
Okay, somebody else want to jump in? Mr. O?
Hi, I'm Thomas O. I'm a Republican in the 8th Congressional District. So I'm actually a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action. And actually, I was on the phone with the NRA yesterday, and they were kind of quite upset with me. And I asked why. And I think two previous candidates mentioned that we got to keep politics out of it. At the end of the day, I'm here to listen to on all sides and do what's best for the 8th District. So when Moms Demand Action approached me, I gladly answered all their questions and took the survey out, and I became a gun sense candidate. The NRA did not like that. They said, anybody that's a gun sense candidate is getting F. But right now, if you look at my NRA rating, it has a bunch of question marks. I was fighting with the NRA about that. But even so, Moms Demand Action, wonderful ladies, some of them have been campaigning at the Democrat headquarters, but we need to be nonpartisan. This is a bipartisan issue, and we have to look at it objectively and work alongside both sides. And my stance is, on guns, where is the problem? Guns don't kill people, people kill people, so we have to focus on the people. This is why I actually support criminal background checks. It seems very common sense to me. We want to make sure that criminals don't have guns in their hands, but we also want to make sure that law-abiding citizens are able to protect themselves. God forbid they are ever in a situation where they have to use a lethal force to protect themselves. But we always want to make sure the Second Amendment still exists, and that's how we were able to fight against tyranny in the Revolutionary War. A second thing is, I learned in the military about, it's about basic gun safety issues, and like I said, guns don't kill people, people kill people. So we need to make sure that there are responsible gun ownerships. I would never leave a loaded handgun on the kitchen table. If I have a firearm, I always make sure it's properly secured. And I also believe that people need to be properly trained on a firearm. Even if you go to a shooting range, you never want to actually show up to someone with their finger in a trigger well or looking down the barrel. It's very dangerous. And that's why I think we need a very common sense approach. And once again, everything is better in moderation and common sense. Thank you.
Okay. I also want to add to that, if anyone opposed the concealed carry reciprocity and the deregularization of silencers, does that make any difference in this whole gun conversation as well? Someone else want to speak on the subject quickly?
Yeah, I'm Don Beyer. Again, let me say that you can't take the politics out of it, because there's not a single Republican in Congress now, in the House or the Senate, that will vote for a common sense gun measure of any sort. And we have not been allowed to have votes on banning terrorists from getting weapons, on background checks, anything. So we have to change Congress first. With my friend Thomas, I would love for this to be a bipartisan issue. And if he somehow gets elected, he'll be the only Republican there willing to actually vote for a common sense gun measure. And part of this is we have to continue to devalue the NRA. The NRA owns one of the parties in America right now, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. So we need background checks, universal. We need assault weapon bans. By the way, guns kill people. People with guns kill people. There are 350 million guns in America. There are more guns than there are people. There are more guns per person than there have ever been in the history of our nation. And that is a big part of the problem. And by the way, gun safety laws do work. I lived in Switzerland for 4 years when I was the ambassador. We would have 5 or 6 gun deaths a year there in a nation of 8 million people. They have a lot of guns, but they're all registered. There is no illegal guns. There's so much, you just have to look at Europe or Australia and say, gun measures do work in really meaningful ways. I think for me, the 2 most important gun pieces are the red flag bill to make sure that someone that has mental illness in your family can be put on the background check list, and second, recognize that 2/3 of all gun deaths are suicides. And we need to really work hard on our mental health system to make sure that that happens. And by the way, I'm totally against the silencer thing, which is crazy. It's just when Donald Trump got elected, the gun industry needed something else to sell. So they decided they were going to sell silencers.
Okay. And I can tell you the name of that act because the congressman that I'm running against, Rob Whitman, introduced the SHARE Act. Sounds real nice, right? Mm-hmm. It's called the Sportsman Heritage and Recreational Enhancement Act. This act puts silencers and, ready for this, armor-piercing bullets back on the street. Yes, cop-killer bullets. In a state where we're not allowed to shoot a certain animal, feral hogs. Mm-hmm. Why would someone in a state that you're not permitted to shoot feral hogs sign on to a legislation like this? It didn't pass, thank goodness, but that's what we're dealing with. We have to use common sense, and it starts now, this year.
Okay.
So one thing I think we keep glossing over is the fact that we have a large amount of illegal guns in this country. It's interesting. I feel like we keep, both sides, they keep ignoring the processes that we have in place and the problems with those processes that are in place. I just saw a study where they talked about people that have committed crimes or have had their gun rights taken away, that have gone to purchase guns, and they've hit that flag on the background check, have not been prosecuted for trying to buy a gun illegally. They just let them walk out. Only 12 people out of thousands of people who have tried to buy guns illegally at a store were prosecuted. That should not be the case. We had a shooting in Texas where you had basically a person who was not supposed to have a gun that was known in one system that didn't talk to another system, and that guy was able to purchase a firearm. We need to fix these processes that we have in place. We need to get the illegal guns out of our neighborhoods. We got to give law enforcement exactly what they need. I can tell you honestly, when I was younger, all it took was $50 and ask somebody where I could get a gun, and it was easy. And I think we need to really start addressing that in our communities. Thank you. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. I am typically a pro-gun candidate. Libertarians in general are. But there are places that we need to have discussions, and we need to fix the system. For example, the background check system we're using has flaws both in that it doesn't list people who should be listed. People have listed a number of those entities here: domestic abusers, criminals who are charged in one jurisdiction and don't move over. On the other hand, it does capture some people that shouldn't be on the list. One of my constituents, or hopefully my constituents, was a 19-year-old young woman post her first birth. Baby had been up. She'd been up for 24+ hours. She just was tired. She ended up in the hospital, and some doctor decided to flag that as an overnight psychiatric admit. So literally 18 years later, she goes to buy a gun, thinking, I just want a gun. And she gets a nice call from a Virginia State Police that she has tried to acquire a weapon illegally because of that event. So there's problems with this system. We need to fix it on both sides so that we are blocking people who should not have guns, but that the system works better for everyone. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. We're going to switch now to criminal justice. It's amazing that almost after 3.5 decades, starting with the 80s, that the increased prison population was in the bodies of mostly black men, mostly for selling crack cocaine, or distribution of marijuana. Then all of a sudden, this past 1.5 years, we realized that our nation is an opiate nation and that we're now drugged influence, and that the government seems to want to give the necessary remedies for those people on drugs. Now, I'm gonna go a little bit hip hop for you. One hip hopper said that we don't have no boats, we don't have no planes, we don't have no boats, we don't ship the dope from coast to coast. So now that it's become a white epidemic, and it seems as if the government wants to step in, I want to talk about the opiate nation, because also realize, having a son that's a medical doctor, in addition to the opiates that are selling mainly cocaine, I'm sure they're talking about. What about the pharmaceuticals that, if you look at the prescription drugs, the commercials, it drives me crazy. I may have a headache, but if I take that drug, my headache be gone, but I might be suicidal or homicidal, which nobody talks about, the fusion of the legal combined with the drugs that we get that are illegal, in addition to the toxic water. That is a toxic cocktail. So if we wonder why Kanye is crazy, maybe he drank the water. I don't know. I'm trying to give the brother a pass. I'm trying to save him, Jesus. Come on, Regina, we go to Chicago. But how do we look at that? And additionally, too, when you talk about that, not only in context of the infiltration of guns and drugs, a lethal combination, what do we do to do it for now the opiate nation health-wise, but how do we remedy the men we put in prison for having drugs and selling drugs that we have not given a pass? Are you following me on that? But I'm okay. So I know this is a loaded question, but you can handle it unless you're on drugs. Maybe you might handle it better. Okay, I want to start on this end first. I'm going to go back with you.
I think I followed that a little bit. Well, the Libertarian Party's position has always been, and mine is too, that we're really too aggressive in how we prosecute drugs, that we treat it as a criminal issue as opposed to a health issue, that we need, regardless of what drug we're talking about, with a few exceptions of some truly nasty stuff in the synthetic world, we need to be treating these drugs as a health problem. You know, why are we locking somebody up for smoking a plant? Why are we locking somebody up who needs help even with opioids? And trust me, I'm not a fan of opioids. I'm a paramedic. My crews are actually at risk every time they walk into a house right now. So we need ways of healing that, but the war on drugs, as it has been fought, has failed. We've been doing this for 30+ years, and the solutions just aren't there. And yes, it's disgusting, frankly, that it took a widespread, quote, white type of situation to cause this to come to the forefront, but at least it is to the forefront now, and we need to deal with it across all the drugs and all the populations to get the best results.
All right.
I'll say coming from where I've come from, you know, mandatory minimums are a big problem. I believe that we shouldn't be just locking up people and throwing away the key anytime that a young person basically goes out and gets caught with a dime bag of marijuana or something like that in that nature. We need to be giving them more opportunities to get out of that path that they're on. You know, I've seen quite a few of my friends that have been caught up in situations like that, and they get out and they don't have any opportunities anymore. I'm glad that a lot of us are, I guess all of us here are for more criminal justice reform, and I believe that, you know, the situation with banning the box, that's important too. Because I've talked to so many people that wish that they had an opportunity even after they got out, and we need to make sure that we are taking care of people who get out and taking them back into our communities and making them feel like they are a part of the community and not keeping them separate. I think that's very important.
Okay, thank you.
First, let me heartily agree with Jeff on mandatory minimums. If I had my way, we'd totally do away with the mandatory minimums. I've been pleased that half of our Democratic delegation in Congress from Virginia, Bobby Scott and Don McEachin, have been the leaders in fighting back on the idea that for years the drug problem was underfunded because it affected communities of color. And once we got the opioids, okay, now it's poor white people, we're going to spend a lot of money on it. The silver lining is that we're actually going to spend a lot more money on the non-opioid things too, for the first time. But big picture, though, I heartily agree with my libertarian friend that this long needed to be a public health problem rather than a crime problem. And that we don't do this with alcohol, we don't do this with tobacco and other things. So we need to realize that this is really the right way to go. Releasing many, many, many of the drug offenders that are in prison already. Let's look at this retroactively. And let's not forget the economy. That both the opioid crisis are poor whites and the crisis with all the drug sales are often poor people of color, is we need to lift up all the people that are living in poverty in America. This is the minimum wage and things like that. One last thing on guns too. One of my favorite, most touching things that came out of the Parkland shooting was one of the dads who said, "Why is the Second Amendment more sacred than my daughter?"
Okay. Mr. O.
Well, I actually got my undergraduate degree in criminology and law and society, so I am all for therapeutic jurisprudence to make sure that there is criminal justice reform where after you serve your time, you're able and you have the tools to succeed in society. And definitely, I think it's more of a health issue than a criminal issue for nonviolent crimes, especially with the drugs. These are people who need medical attention and need to be properly cared for. I also believe in basically for petty crimes, just as marijuana. I'm all for legalizing and taxifying marijuana and decriminalizing it. And actually, for something petty like marijuana, it creates a black market economy that could fuel to gun violence, for example, gives money to gangs. But when you actually legalize that, it's creates actually a market revenue source, and it's not illegal. And also, I believe that the fact of the matter is there is an issue what's going on with the criminal justice system. If you go to Fairfax County Courthouse, for example, I don't know it's exact statistic, but 1/3 of the 8th District is minorities, but there are 3 times as minorities showing up to court for whatever reason. I think that's absurd, and it's unfair that a white person would actually get them like 6 months for a rape. And you see all the time on your Facebook, YouTube, why is there a huge gap? Why is, if you're a minority or someone of color, you have maximum punishment, but if you're white and privileged, you get almost nothing. You walk away scot-free after having a nice, good lawyer.
All right. Vanjie, before you take that, I want to invoke a young man in the state of Pennsylvania. You may have heard about him, Jordan Harris. Jordan Harris was able to get past a bill called 166, and what it actually did was not only ban the box, but after 10 years, those men or women who were incarcerated, if they proved themselves not to get in more trouble, were able to get their record totally expunged, and they had enfranchisement rights given back to them. Now, the country of Namibia, an African country, they actually go into prisons to make sure the men and women vote. Does that sound like something that you might be able to do, or you think about advocating for? That's similar, since with this great democratic power, a republic anyway, Ms. Vanjie?
Well, I can tell you, I know that our system is broken. Mm-hmm. And first off, let me answer your first question from the last time. Mm-hmm. I want to decriminalize marijuana at the federal level and let the states worry about marijuana. And in that, we can retroactively go back and release people who are convicted of marijuana, crimes involving marijuana. I am running on the Democratic ticket, but I am running for American values. As far as American values, if you have not committed a heinous crime such as murder, I don't believe that you should lose your voting rights. These are your rights as a citizen. I mean, you're still a citizen whether you're in prison or not. We should not take those rights away from someone who has not taken a life. Second, opioids. Mm-hmm. Just back in 1986, the 80s, we had a crack epidemic, and it went long overlooked. The 90s, even the early 2000s, and no one said anything. This is what I feel about the opioid crisis: pain management. Mm-hmm. We need to teach doctors pain management. We need to make sure that dental providers are not providing 30 pills of Vicodin or any harsh drug to a patient. I had 2 daughters who got their wisdom teeth pulled days apart. And I didn't fill their prescription. I got them Tylenol. These doctors don't know what they're doing because they're not educated. We need to educate our medical and our dental professionals. Lastly, we need to make sure that we have treatment programs. Tim Kaine went into a prison, and he found that the program inside the prison was helping patients, helping prisoners at a faster rate than any program out on the street. And this is the incredible part. People were knocking at the door to get into the jail, to get into their program. And people were asking the question, why is it that I have to get locked up before I can get help for crack or opioids?
Okay.
We need to change our system, and it starts with Medicare for all.
Well, Regina, she already spoke on behalf of your representative. Do you have anything to add on behalf of Representative Kaine?
Well, I think Senator Kaine has, while being in the Senate, has supported legislation to reduce over-incarceration. He's very sensitive about that. In addition to, he wants to make sure that there is some protection that once you get out, that there is a job, there is something waiting for you. And so want to strengthen the financial protection for all of those that are in fact incarcerated. He is serious about this. He does this. Even if he was not in Senate, he would in fact be doing these things. So.
All right, thank you. Mr. Stewart.
You know, when you're on the local level, you can't just talk about things. You got to get things done. And the fact is, there's been a lot of talk in Washington, but very, very little has been accomplished by Washington. And in Prince William, when we've been hit with this issue, and by the way, it affects people of all races, all ethnicities, we did something about it. We are about to increase the size of our jail yet again, but we looked around, we took back, and we said, look, what's going on here? And the fact is that our jails, and it's not just there, but it's across the country, our jails are being used to house people who have mental health issues, who have drug abuse issues and substance abuse issues. So we started something called the Divert Program. We trained all of our law enforcement officials as well as those in the judicial system to recognize those who have substance abuse or mental health issues. And as soon as it's identified, we take them, we divert them out of the criminal justice system and get them the treatment that they need so that they can recover instead of just putting them back in jail.
All right, thank you. We're going to go now to education. Just as the nation is facing a shortage on teachers, because we know that's a heavy lift, and some of the things that the teachers face, probably due to the first two subjects we mentioned around guns and criminal justice, and looking at the students who are in the schools as well who might carry guns. And back in the day when you had respect for your teacher, your professor, that seems to be lacking. But Virginia also faces a shortage of teachers in areas such as special education, middle school education, math, foreign languages, and English, which was surprising me to see this on this page. In 2017, Governor McAuliffe ordered the Virginia Board of Education to implement an emergency regulation that would allow the state's public colleges and universities to start offering undergraduate students a major in education. I look like that because I cannot imagine that that is not just a natural process. So when do people stop loving to educate our children? But what more should Virginia do, and what can Congress do to address this issue of teacher shortage and really a lack of appreciation for educators? Because I always think whatever and how we ever pay the NBA, the NFL players, how can we not do that for the educators who are really the caretakers of our children in dangerous environments often, that they can be compensated, that they may want to give their time to their children who are at risk, who have lack at home, society does not bolster them. How can we get the teachers back? How we can bring that sexy back in education, ladies and gentlemen?
I want to answer that as a staffer of the American Federation of Teachers. Kaine, as well as Congressman Bobby Scott, has been a serious advocate of what we do. At every level, to making sure that teachers, one, have adequate pay so that they would not, I mean, you have teachers with master's degrees that have to do part-time at Walmart or Uber. And so Senator Kane has worked very closely with the leadership of the American Federation of Teachers to make sure that we address those issues at every level, from guns in the schools to teacher pay, adequate books, adequate training, and he will continue to be that in Congress for those of us who are looking out for the educators.
All right, thank you.
That I know.
Okay, you know, in some schools, they actually ask the parents to bring in this bulk supplies for the students as well. Do you think that parents should get a tax credit if we have to pay for public education when it comes out of our taxes anyway? I'm just asking because of my grandchildren. That's another saying. Okay, I'll be at, you know, Target, you know. So I just think, you want to say somebody else?
Sure. I think there's a problem. You know, in the early 1970s with the Department of Education, it was initially placed there to help out struggling school systems. But as time has gone on, the funding has actually gone down. But you know one thing that didn't go down? The regulations. And these regulations, which start at the federal government, with the Department of Education, and a lot of them, those regulations have been there a long, long time. And then they're filtered down through the states, and the states down into the local school systems. So every time the school board comes up in front of the local boards of supervisors across this state and across this country, and we notice that the number of staff, non-teaching staff, administrative staff, it keeps ballooning, it keeps going up. And we say, well, why are you hiring all those administrators? Why aren't you putting more money in for higher pay for teachers? Why are you not hiring more teachers? And the answer always comes back, because these are regulations. The regulations start with the federal government, they go down to the states and down to the localities. One of the things we have to do is allow local parents, local teachers, and localities to run their own school systems without so much interference from the federal government.
All right. Someone else want to address? On the education, the questions on education.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go down the line?
No, it's, you.
What I was going to say is a mother of 6 daughters. I can answer that whole question about the bulk supplies. One of the things that I find horrendous as a parent is that we have to streamline our processes. We need a budget that fits education and is a priority. I understand we need shipbuilding. I understand we need defense spending. But what we need most is future leaders. The reason why I introduced my INVEST initiative is because I want to make sure that teachers have money. The average teacher in the state of Virginia works 2 or 3 jobs. Mm-hmm. These are our heroes. These are the women and men who get up every morning with that little bit of money and they go in there and they educate our children. How do you fix the Department of Education? Put a leader who understands education, understands its funding, understands what families go through. I can tell you firsthand, until we start investing in our teachers can't invest in our students the way we need them to.
Thank you. Mr. O?
Do we have any teachers in this room? If you have, could you please stand up? Let's all give them a round of applause to the teachers. We need to start, you know, many of us here, I believe a lot of us on the same page that teachers need to be properly compensated. You know, there are lifelong public servants. We honor our veterans, and we should just honor our teachers just as much. They dedicate their whole life, and they give one of the greatest gifts that you can ever give to students, even whether you're a child or adult, wisdom and knowledge. I think we need to properly compensate our teachers to make them be able to focus on teaching and not worry about how to pay their electric bill by taking a second job. But how do we do this? With efficient government spending. There's a lot of government waste, and we need to have more transparency on what's going on. And it's absolutely unfortunate, but that teachers have to spend their own personal paycheck to pay for school supplies. But it's also very respectable that they are willing to do so, because that is their true passion. And teachers have no reason to be armed unless they're a seasoned police officer that just works undercover and is a teacher. But other than that, they should be focusing on educating our children and for our future.
I usually don't quote Lee Iacocca, but the smartest thing he ever said was that if we paid lawyers what we pay teachers, and teachers what we pay lawyers, what a different world we would have. One of the most important books I read was written by a Wall Street Journal reporter a couple years ago called The Smartest Kids in the World. And she spent a couple years looking at the kids that did best on the International PISA test, who did much better than the US, who typically finishes like in the mid-20s. And the number one were the kids in Finland. And when she went there, she discovered the thing that was different was, first of all, no homework, which I'm heartily for. Kids really like that. Longer recesses. And the teachers there was the most respected profession. That it was harder to get into the teacher universities in Finland than it is to get into med school in the United States. So this is a matter of elevating teachers, the respect we give them, especially the money that we give them. My friends have all made the exact same point. And a lot of that comes back to the fact that historically, we pay teachers based on the property tax. John Chapman is with us, City of Alexandria. He knows how difficult it is to manage that budget, which means a wealthy jurisdiction is going to be able to pay more than a lot of the poor jurisdictions because the property values are so different. We need to think much more globally about that.
Thank you.
I say teachers are on the front lines of education, similar to being in the military. We're on the front lines of war, right? And for some reason, those professions don't get compensated the way they should be getting compensated. Last year, I actually sat through a school board debate and in Fairfax County at large, and there was a young lady who was a senior at one of the high schools that basically asked the question. She said, "How are you guys going to pay for us to have school supplies?" And I said to myself, wait a second, this is one of the richest counties in the world. They have a $2 billion budget, and yet this kid didn't have supplies in their class. And this is one of the reasons, the compensation reason is one of the reasons why teachers are leaving. People aren't coming into the field. They don't want to get involved because they don't see any benefit in it, honestly. And we need to do the same thing that we do in a lot of spaces, is provide the incentives. If it's not just salary, there's got to be something else that is the hook to get people to want to be involved, right? And that's something that I believe that we really need to do as a community. And I think it's great that we're having this open forum and we're seeing that a lot of us agree that we need to pay teachers more. And that's something that I think is across the board. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Last but not least.
Both my parents are teachers. My father's actually one of those rare elementary, primary grade male teachers, which is sort of a great thing. And there's a couple factors out here. One, we need to recognize that our teachers are incredibly valuable, and our culture overall does a very poor job of that. My father was fortunate enough to teach in a community that had many Vietnamese and Korean members. Teachers are one step below God in those cultures. And the amount of way he was treated by those families and the type of response he got from the parents and the homes was so much different. And we need to figure out how to bring that back. And that's a hard thing for us to do as politicians, but we need to consider it. I do think we need to look at how to pay teachers more. I think it's reasonable to look at incentive programs like tax breaks for them. I do agree, though, with Mr. Stewart that a lot of the cost and stuff in the systems are coming down from too much federal regulation. Even with my parents, so much of their time was being spent on trying to fill in the right boxes and the right forms just to meet these growing demands that had nothing to actually do with educating their children. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to open it up to the audience. They may have questions on certain subjects that we didn't get a chance to get to, like immigration, the environment, whether it's climate change or environmental racism, which create toxins in certain communities and people more than others. And of course, health, because we always have the debate between pro-life and pro-choice. But I want to know about the pro-living aspect of everybody, which is different. People don't want to abort babies, but they don't want to take care of them. And women, especially African-American women, and women in particular, maternal death rates in America is higher than some so-called developing countries. So maybe some of the audience members might address that in their questions. But now the mic is hot and open. If you have any questions in the audience, I think the cards are going to be read, or all right. Oh, you have one, sir? Okay.
Yeah, my question is about race. My perception is...
Okay, rules, no comments if you can get a question in, because we're running out of time, so your question. Not for you, sir, I'm just saying in general, I forgot to say that. Okay, now you can go. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that everybody, not you, I'm looking at you, but I just want to say in general for the people coming up with questions, to make sure they have the question. All right, sir, thank you.
I'm ready to ask it.
Okay.
Okay. My perception is the president has created a divisive America, and to be honest with you, make America again, to me means make America white again. Do you support his views, the Republicans, do you support his views where he commented about Charlottesville that there were good people on both sides, good KKK members and good Nazis?
I'll take this. I'll take this. You want to go ahead?
Let me go first.
Okay.
So, honestly, it's been very interesting, being a minority candidate in Northern Virginia for the Republican Party. I've actually, since last year, I've actually talked about the KKK more than I had in my entire life, which is ridiculous. We shouldn't be giving these people a platform, honestly. I would say about the president's comments, a lot of us didn't agree with his comments. And one of the biggest things is we need to focus on getting this hate out of our communities. We just had 2 days ago in Annandale, one of the Jewish centers was vandalized with Nazi symbols. I'm not for that. I know most people up here aren't for that, right? And so I would say we have to, I think too often we focus on the people at the top, and in these races, these local races, we're still local federal candidates. I think you need to look at each of us and see what our backgrounds are. I've been called a racist in this race, which is, absolutely absurd. Like I'm against the black community, which makes absolutely no sense. But I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing and talking about my opponent's record and continue going on the way that I've been doing.
Okay.
I think you wanted to talk.
Yes. Actually, during the All Unite the Right rally that just happened recently, I actually hosted a counter protest at the Lincoln Memorial to reject the alt-right, to remind people that the Republican Party is a party of equality, the party that actually was against the Jim Crow laws, a party that ended slavery. And it's very important that people actually understand that as well. And it's funny because people are like, Republicans are racist. I had a white Democrat say, you're a racist, and then he bowed to me at the farmer's market and walked away because I'm Asian. We need to, overall, there's a lot of hate going on, and we need to start by being a positive example to each other and, lead by example. Talk is cheap, but we have to do the act and make sure we are positive. And we also need to stop by labeling everybody as a character. If I have one bad incident with an Asian American, I don't say everybody's just like the Asian American. If I have one bad incident with a Democrat, I don't think all Democrats are like that. Same thing that goes for Republicans. And all people from all walks of life are unique individuals, and that's how God created us.
Okay.
I just want to add one quick thing. I just want to thank Jeff for running as an African American as a Republican. There are 240 Republicans in the U.S. House. 2 of them are African American. We only have 194 Democrats, and something like 45 are African American, and that will grow on November 6th. They're very represented, and that's because of the parties of people that are willing to step up and run and be part of it. So.
Okay, thank
Well, there's going to be 3 because we're going to elect Jeff.
Yeah.
Look, I think that this president, you may not like him personally. You may not like his tweets. You may not like other things that he said. But the fact of the matter is this, that this country is booming. We have the lowest, the least you can do is provide some respect to those who are speaking up here tonight.
We'll let him finish.
The unemployment rate among African Americans and Asians and Hispanics is at the lowest level in American history. It's at the lowest level for women in this country in 65 years. It's the lowest unemployment rate overall since 1969. Working class blue-collar wages are rising at the fastest clip in 22 years. A rising tide raises all ships. This country is booming. I think we need to focus on what unites us rather than what divides us. And when we do that, we can fix a lot of our problems that have been plaguing this country for a long time.
Thank you. Young lady?
In the interest of time, I have 2 questions from people in the audience, and I'll just pose both of them because they're pretty easy to remember, and you all can decide how you're going to respond. So the first question is, what is your view on congressional term limits? That's the first question.
Okay.
The second one is, to all city council candidates, how will you tackle overcrowding at local schools, especially T.C. Williams?
Good question. Term limits?
I'll take, can I take that? I'm for term limits. I think that with any field, you kind of get to a place where you may become stagnant and you just kind of don't innovate anymore, and you just feel like you're very comfortable in your position. I don't know what a good number of years may be for the House or the Senate, but I do believe that we need more diverse viewpoints, and we need to hear from different perspectives, because honestly, you know, when you have different backgrounds, you come up with different solutions for old problems, and that's something that I really think is important.
I'll give you the answer to term limits. They're called voting. We vote. That's how you get people out of office. Our Constitution was written the way it was written for a reason. And everyone in this country over the age of 18 can vote. And this is why we tell our children, our friends, our family, the clerk at the store to vote. That is your term limit.
Anyone address the second question? Let me do this. How many of you believe in term limits for congressional members? Raise your hand. Okay, so I assume the others don't, or they have a deeper. How many of you agree with term limits for congressional members?
Let me just make the simple point that in communities that struggle, that are underprivileged, often getting a member to come and stay a long time. Bobby Scott, Newport News, Jim Clyburn, South Carolina, Maxine Waters, LA, et cetera. The only way they get power is by staying in there. If you kick them out after 6 years or 8 years, they never get the power that they need to represent these communities.
The second part of the question, was it answered? Could you, the city council, someone want to address that? No, okay, I have a question for you, Corey Stewart. How do you respond to Ford laying off employees and losing $1 billion because of the tariffs while opposing those tariffs at the same time, Trump's tariffs?
So this is actually my background. I'm an international trade attorney. American workers, American businesses are the most productive in the world. We beat everybody. And I believe in free trade, but it's got to be free trade in both directions. We're allowing foreign goods to come into this country virtually without any tariffs. One example, if you want to import a foreign vehicle into the United States, we put a 2.5% tariff on that car. But when we want to export a US-made vehicle to Europe, they put a 10% tariff. You want to export to China, it's a 25% tariff. You know why we've lost our manufacturing sector in this country? Do you know why we've lost all those manufacturing jobs? Because we've had presidents who have refused to stand up for American workers and American jobs. And that's why the president is levying these tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods. It's to force the Chinese and other trading partners to the bargaining table to say, look, if you want to export your products into the United States, you've got to accept ours too. And it's working. They're lowering their tariff barriers, and now American goods will start to be manufactured again in the United States. It's coming back, and thank goodness that the president is standing up for American jobs.
All right, thank you. Young lady?
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Marla Childell, and I'm in the 10th Congressional District. I have a follow-up regarding the discussion earlier around gun control. There seemed to be a lot of consensus on the dais around common sense gun control, but I have a specific follow-up to that. Actually, and it's a question, a three-part question on 3 specific proposals, and I would like to hear from each of the panelists as to whether they would support legislation on these 3 measures.
Can we just get a yes and a no response for them due to time? You want to know a yes or no if they're going to, based on your 3 points?
Okay. So the first measure is whether you would support legislation that would ban bump stocks that turn guns into automatic weapons, such as what was used in Las Vegas?
Yes.
Okay, how many yes?
Yes. Yes.
How many no?
I just want to make one correction. Bump stocks don't create automatic weapons. The automatic weapons goes into the chamber. Bump stock actually makes the weapon shorter. So are you referring to automatic weapons? Because I don't think we don't need automatic weapons as an everyday citizen.
I'm referring to bump stocks that would allow for guns to shoot a higher volume of bullets than they would normally do.
Bump stocks doesn't make it the fire rate. Trust me, I'm an Army Airborne Ranger. Bump stock actually adjusts, so everyone's different sizes. Now, like I said, I just want to make sure we're being correct. I'm against having high rate of firearms because we don't need it as everyday citizens, and we need to make sure our police are able to be properly equipped to fight back crime. Now, bump stocks is totally different. It's based on people's sizes and where shoulder pads are. So I just want to be correct on that.
Okay, so what is the correct term?
My question is, are you talking about increased fire rate or the position that someone holds a weapon?
Increased firing rate. What would be the correct term for that?
No, we don't want increased fire rate.
Part two?
Part two. Would you support legislation that would ban the online digital printing of guns?
Yes. How many yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, the no's. Somebody want to jump in real quick and give why the
Only reason why it would be no if it's already a gun manufacturing hunting company that moves to digital printing instead. Other than that, a private citizen shouldn't be able to print digitally.
Regina Banji, you have something real quick to say?
The thing is this. I live in the country. I live out in King George, Virginia. And I'm sorry. First of all, we have manufacturers. The reason why we want common sense gun reform is to control who has weapons. If you start allowing people to make weapons at home, that goes out the window.
Mm-hmm.
It's like common sense. We have to protect Americans.
Okay. We have time for more questions? No?
Oh, part three.
No, I'm saying that the time is up, even though you have part three. You don't want me to have these gentlemen here to
close out.
two questions. Okay.
Okay, first to the moderator, I want to correct one thing that was said, because I don't think we want to leave church ignorant. First of all, when President Obama took office in 2009, we were losing over 800,000 jobs a month. The unemployment rate at that time was 9.7%. When Obama left office, we were somewhere hovering around 4%. So in the 2 years that 45 has been in office, we've decreased the unemployment rate by 0.4%. So let's not leave here ignorant based on someone who came in to deliver a message for us.
Said? Oh, okay.
My question is, first of all, we've gone from, and this is coming from one of the more respected generals in this country, who is a Republican, who has said that we've gone from being we the people to we the president. Our challenge here is we're continuing to see a party who has previously supported areas, and today we're contradicting all of those things as it relates to the Emoluments Clause, as it relates to taxes and tariffs and all those things. So my question to the Republicans that sit on the panel here this evening is where are we going as it relates to allowing those things that benefit the select few, and many times we refer to as the 1%. Where do we go in terms of reestablishing ourselves as a nation of we the people and not just we the president? Thank you.
And before you answer, I'm going to have the last gentleman to ask this question, and then you can combine what he said and what this gentleman asked and make that your closing statement, and you each have, and the young lady, your part three, you want to throw that in too, because I want to consolidate all this. You heard what he said. Young lady, your part three.
My part three was whether you would support legislation that would require adding technology such as fingerprint technology like we have in our smartphones to guns, so that only the registered owner of the gun could actually fire it.
Okay, so in other words, where we go from here, the last part, she spoke about the guns, and sir,
Yes.
your question?
Hi, my name is Mark Peters. I'm in Congressman Byers' district, 8th District. What I was wondering about is what anyone on the panel can answer. What could be done to alleviate the community destruction and displacement caused by gentrification? And additionally, I guess this kind of dovetails into what Mr. Maddox was saying. How can we work together, public officials and citizens, to create a groundswell that will push the Bureau of Counterterrorism and the Department of State to declare the alt-right, the KKK, and neo-Nazi and other white supremacist groups to be terrorist organizations?
Okay, out of fairness, my host, how much time can I give them? Each 3 minutes to make their closing remarks? And I don't know how you're going to do that, but if you're a politician, you got to be like Jesse Jackson. You got to have your, your stuff going. But for how long? So how long can they have? 2 minutes? All right. Let's go this way, starting with you, Mr. Stewart.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having us all here tonight. And obviously, we're going to have some disagreement, but you know what? We did something. We sat together and we spoke for an evening, and I think that's what we need. And I'm going to be here afterward. I look forward to speaking to anybody who wants to speak to me. I'm here for as long as you want me. And but I think Congress and the Senate, the House and the Senate, should take this as an example of what we need to do. And we're going to start off, and sometimes we're going to start off with very vehement disagreements. But I think the problem is this country is we've become divided into two camps. And I don't think that serves us very well. There used to be a time when Americans, even back with Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, who was the Speaker of the House, they used to get things accomplished by talking to one another. And it didn't mean that they all had to come into some sort of mushy middle and they had to agree on everything. That wasn't the case. But if we can focus on the things that we can agree on, then we can get some things accomplished. And that's what I want to do. And I know that we have those things. We all want better health care. We all can focus in on those. There are things that Republicans and Democrats, people of all backgrounds, know. We need more competition. We need more choices. We need to be able to buy our health care insurance across state lines. We need to make sure that the prices are going down, not up, that the quality is improving. And there are ways to get those things done. But if we can just focus on what we agree on, I'm confident that we can get things done. That's what I've done in Prince William County. That's what I will do for everybody in the United States Senate. You can count on that. I will always have an open door, and I ask for your vote, and I'd be proud to have your vote on November 6th. Thank you.
In the sake of time, I'm just going to urge you. Many of you, this is not the first time that Senator Kane has come to the church or has talked to the pastor. He is that kind of person. He works to bring Virginians together, to work for a common good. He never fails to go across the line, across the aisle, to work with his Republican counterparts. He means the best for the state, for the country, and begin to bring everyone together to have a conversation. I will be assured that all of the questions that you've asked here, that we will make sure that you have. His campaign manager, I want her to stand up. It's a sister. Campaign manager is here, and both of us will be outside. I urge you, please vote. And when you vote for Senator Kane.
You know, there was a great man who once said, without struggle, you can see no progress. I live in a district that spans from Prince William County down to Williamsburg, Virginia. Our district struggles every day. I have citizens in my district who have no transportation, no employment, no access to health care. I decided to run for Congress because we needed leadership on Capitol Hill to make sure that happens. My background is in strategic planning. Yes, I fix things in our government, and I see our Congress is broken, and it's a strategic failure. But I need your help, because in order for me to help us, I need you to help us. See, this election is not my election. It's our election. It's your election. See, we the people demand answers. We the people demand safety from gun violence. We the people deserve health care. Our children deserve quality education. We deserve to retire in peace and live without having to work 2 jobs after you retire. We deserve to treat our teachers, our veterans, our enlisted military. Oh, by the way, in my district, we have enlisted men and women on food stamps. We deserve better in this country. We deserve better than what we have right now. And I ask you for your support. I ask you to knock on doors for me. I ask you to make phone calls. I ask you to donate to my campaign. Because see, this campaign will always be about people first. And by all means, visit my website, email me, call me, because my team will tell you I answer my own phone. And I will talk to you. My website is Vanjie Williams. Sorry, you can go to that one too, VanjieWilliams.com. But go to VanjieForCongress.com and reach out to me. I look forward to having a conversation with each and every one of you because we, the people, are coming back.
Once again, my name is Thomas O. I'm the Republican nominee running in the 8th District. I just want to answer those 3 questions. I just have a personal pet peeve that I will never avoid a question and tell you an honest one, even though it might make you mad, because I want to be honest to people. The fingerprints with the gun thing, I think that's pretty cool, actually. I would like to have that. I don't ever want someone to sneak up in my own house and use my own firearm against me, so I like that idea. Someone mentioned about, the president and the Constitution. I swore an oath to the Constitution. I actually talked about that in my opening statement. The Constitution comes first. And we're so polarized and tribal right now, Republicans and Republicans, Democrats and Democrats. People ask me, what do you think about the president? Or like, are you guys support the president as a Republican? I said, it doesn't matter. I support the Constitution because that's why we have checks and balances for a reason. And that's why. And then as people ask me about what do you think about Kavanaugh, I was like, it's irrelevant. That's the Senate issue. But I'll still give you my personal opinion. But we have an issue right now. We're so tribal right now that Democrats will only vote for a Democrat bill and Republicans will vote for a Republican bill. And another issue that we have, you mentioned about the KKK being a domestic terrorist. They should be just as radically pursued as radical Muslims. And I actually tweeted about that. If you guys want to stalk me down on my Twitter, I think it was back in March or when I first announced my candidacy, because it is a huge issue. But I think the third part of the question is, so how do we actually start doing that? We start by actually having people who represent minorities at the top level. We talked about the 1%, all right? I'm not your average politician. I'm your working class American. I don't have the $1 million in the bank account. I don't have the connections to buy this district. If 80% of Americans are working class Americans and middle class, why isn't the people in Congress 80% of part of middle class? I'm Thomas O. Please visit my website. It's www.letschangecongress.org, and my slogan is People Before Politics. It's on my bumper sticker. Check it out.
I too am very intrigued by smart guns. I don't think we can mandate them yet, but it's a good move in that direction so that only the person that owns the gun can fire it. On the issue of gentrification, we have 150,000 families waiting for housing in this metropolitan area. It's an enormous problem. Arlington and Alexandria especially have lost many, many affordable housing units. And it's not just about building new housing. A lot of it's preserving existing neighborhoods to allow people that have lived in it for sometimes generations to stay there. I agree with Thomas that we need to change Congress. I think we need to do that by reelecting Jerry Conley, by electing Vanjie Williams, by sending Tim Kaine back, by taking over the House. Because we're never going to get gun reform, unfortunately, as long as the Republicans are in charge. We are now watching the Republicans who tried to overturn the Affordable Care Act 70 times on the House floor. You have the president now trying to take away the waiver of pre-existing conditions. It's just really crazy stuff. Donald Trump promised that we're going to get an infrastructure bill. Again, we're not allowed to have a vote on that. So if we can get Democratic leadership in, hopefully we can get the infrastructure bill to put people back to work. But then most existentially, the thing that concerns me most of all is the fact that there's enormous wealth inequality and income inequality in this nation still. The average net worth of a black family is a fraction the average net worth of a white family. And these are really difficult issues trying to figure out how to move forward. But we're only have to do it if we're thinking about justice, economic justice, environmental justice, and for racial justice for all of us. So I ask for your vote, and I'll do my best as your servant to keep moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so real quick to touch on those 3 questions we got. To touch on the fingerprinting, I feel like that could be a Pandora's box of who is in control of shutting down those weapons, in a sense. I don't think we should necessarily put that in the government's control. As it relates to your question, sir, I would say one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is something that Senator Tim Kaine actually put forward. He's the Republican senator, African-American Republican senator from South Carolina. He put forward economic opportunity zones in that piece of legislation that actually provides money for impoverished areas around the country. They'll basically take capital gains money to try and invest in those areas to try and create more opportunities for people. That's something that was a principle that was created by Jack Kemp, but never came into realization until last year. So that's something that I'm very proud that he actually did. Talked about, the KKK, et cetera. Yeah, those organizations should be listed as terrorists. We shouldn't be. It's 2018. We shouldn't even be talking about them. But for some reason, they're still in the mainstream, right? So real quick, just about me, this has been interesting. I don't like being called a politician. I've been doing this for like a year, but that's the case. And I can tell you, this game is very crazy. I've been called racist. I've been called puppet, like I can't think for myself. I've been called all kinds of things by my opponent. I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm a problem solver. I've been that my entire life, my entire adult career. I've been working in places where you see a problem, you solve it. You don't see that problem, they keep running on it year after year after year, and we keep electing you. Every single one of these problems that we talked about today has been going on my entire life. Why hasn't anything changed? I shouldn't be talking about this. I should be talking about more forward-thinking things. But that is not the case right now. And that's how it should be. Both parties have lost sight of what made them the way they are today. Both parties have. And we need people who will go back to the principles of each party and try to make a difference. And that's what I'm doing. You guys can check me out at www.doveforcongress.com, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook. I'm on everything. I'm an IT guy, so you can reach out to me at any time. Thank you.
The fingerprint thing with the guns, I think, is a really cool idea. I don't think the technology is inexpensive enough or reliable enough yet for it, but if it gets to the point that it is, even being a fairly anti-gun control person, I think that's a decent thing. But right now, the technology, as someone who is in technology, the technology is just not reliable enough yet. Overall, we've talked about division and needing new voices. I'm a libertarian. Whether it's, we need more voices represented in government at all levels, whether it's not just the R's and the D's, not just the left and the rights. We need more people to put in different perspective, whether that's the Green Party, the Libertarians, the Constitutionalist Party, the Whig Party, which actually reformed in Virginia after 160-some years, which just blew all of our minds away. When we get more voices, we get more options. We also start to get so that we just don't have these two poles fighting against each other and pushing against each other. When you introduce some extra points in there, then people have to start sort of, it's just not, pulling on the tug-of-war rope, it starts pulling a little bit aside. So I think we do need more views. The things I've been telling the high school students and other groups I've met with, I've got 3 asks, and I make those same 3 asks to you in my few seconds left. 1, do take the time to get to know every candidate and every issue on your ballot. I don't care if you're a lifelong Republican, a lifelong Democrat, a lifetime Libertarian. You need to actually take a look at all your candidates because none of us in any of our parties are necessarily cookie cutter. The second thing is don't single source your information. Look at different news sources. If you're a fan of CNN, occasionally look at Fox. If you're a Fox fan, look at CNN. Try to pick some other good sources, Reuters, Post. Maybe even look at some international news so that you're getting a fair, wider perspective on the news. And finally, and I think all of us have said this, please, please vote. Thank you.
Let's give a rounding applause to all of our representatives here. Thank you very much. I wish you all very good luck. And being a resident of Washington, D.C., I hope that you vote if you're elected for statehood for the District of Columbia. And getting my D.C. pitch in, I now ask Kofi Annan to come up and give some remarks. Thank you very much.
I know I'm standing in the middle of between you guys and getting back home, so I'll be really brief. First of all, let's give all the candidates another round. Thank you, YPN. Thank you, Alfred Street Baptist Church. Thank you all for showing up here. It's a rainy night. This is really important, and it's just outstanding to see such a great turnout here today. I don't need to really tell you guys, but obviously we're living in really tense times. It's funny that, you know, when Barack Obama was elected, there was a lot of talk about we're living in post-racial times. Remember that? It's funny now. It's funny now. It was probably funny then too, but it's hilarious that, you know, that we're at the point right now where that's obviously laughable. Obviously, there's a lot of things that have happened that have scaled back and rolled back a lot of the things that we as the NAACP have been fighting for generations. The war on crime, the war on drugs is back. The war on immigrants is basically a thing right now, even though it's not labeled that. It seems like everything that that's been tried before has just been like, okay, let's do that thing that just cost $1 billion and didn't work. Let's try that again. 50% of our prisoners and people that are locked up are in there for drug-related crimes. There was a lot of talk tonight about trying to fix those things, but let's hope they actually happen. The women are obviously still fighting for the right to be believed. Voter rights suppression is a thing again. It's always been a thing, but it's obviously picking up a lot of steam. Voter ID laws, gerrymandering issues. These are things that don't always get the headlines, but it's obviously some things that are really important. Obviously, we've just been reminded about the dangers of climate change just yet again. We have the worst hurricane that's ever hit the state of Florida. Just happened yesterday. And I'm pretty sure the one before that was another worse, right? And like every time there's a storm, there's a worse. And so these issues, even if they aren't just issues that affect African American communities, we have to pay attention to them because they affect all of us equally. To the candidates, thank you again for being here. And I would challenge you to remember your why. Remember why you're running. Remember what issues you're trying to change. Remember why you're here tonight. And then make sure it's not just lip service to this community, but make sure that when you go back to the white communities, that you're willing to repeat some of the same things that you said here tonight. And that you actually work to implement some of the things that you've promised to here tonight. Which gets me to you guys. It's important that you don't just vote. I know there's been a lot of talks about voting, and it's important to vote. But then what happens is that you vote, everybody votes, but then there's a big drop-off as to how engaged we remain throughout the year and throughout that term. Yes, this is even more important to me than just voting, because a lot of times we elect these officials, and then there's this big gap in engagement. We don't show up at the school board meetings. We don't write letters. We don't stay engaged. We don't send emails. We don't check up to see what policies they're actually trying to implement, and then we get mad when we say, well, they're not fixing nothing. That's right. So you heard all the things they had to say. They were all really nice. Now, when they get elected, make sure you hold them accountable. One of the first things I did as president of Fairfax NAACP was to issue a report card. And that report card was on all the elected officials. And there were Democrats that got Ds and Fs, and there were Republicans that did better, not much better. But They did. It was a criminal justice report card, and obviously there's some partisan issues there. But the point is, we have to make sure that we hold our elected officials accountable after we elect them, and just don't let that gap stay there. We can't just protest. Protest is important, but if protesting was to get things done, this administration probably would have stopped doing a lot of the things that they have been doing, right? Because there have been more protests during this administration than any other administration. So we can't just vote and we can't just protest. We have to stay engaged throughout the year. So I'll leave you all with that. I know it's late, but thank you again. Thank you to the candidates. Give you all yourselves a round of applause.
I'm trapped. Thank you. I am trapped inside the chairs.
Okay, let's get you out.
Oh, they want to take a picture for us.